Hey there, folks. How you doing today? Give me just a couple of minutes of your time to give you an editor's note to explain some things that are going on with us here on this channel so that you will better understand not only this video, but also some of the other stuff that we're going to have going forward. For those of you that are familiar with our channel and have seen some of the stuff that we have produced in the past, you will no doubtedly have noticed that over the past few months, content that I would describe as our quality content, that's up to interpretation by the end viewer, I suppose, as to what quality actually means. But what I'm talking about is content that we produce here that has a lot of editing work that goes into it to make it better and more viewable for you, has kind of declined over the past few months. There are some very good reasons for that. Allow me to summarize and say that over the past few months, really since about the beginning of this year, I have personally been busier with more on my plate in terms of actual real-world obligations than I can ever recall. With that being said, something had to give somewhere, and I just decided I did not have the time I needed to devote to projects on here, and I had to back off. I had to pump the brakes. So now, with that in mind, those of you that watch everything that we put out here on the channel know that I have a series of videos that I do that I refer to as unfiltered fans-only content or UFO content, and those are videos made just for the folks that want to see something every now and then, and a lot of those are unscripted, unedited, or with minimal editing, and they lack some of the final spit and polish that we put on other reviews. This review, and if it goes well, subsequent reviews for the foreseeable future will kind of follow that line in terms of how they are produced. And what that means for you is you might have to deal with some Shatner-esque pauses of Paul Harrell level proportions. You might have to deal with me misspeaking, correcting myself, and just leaving that part in the video. It is what it is. That's the only way we're going to get this done, at least as far as I can see it in the very near future. If you sit through all that, thanks. And let's get into today's production. Out here on the table in front of me is my Ruger American Gen 2 chambered in .243 Winchester. This is not the first Ruger American Gen 2 that I ever laid eyes on. It is the first one that I've gotten a hold of in a .243. I had decided early on, after seeing some positive feedback from other people on the second generation Ruger American, that I was going to get one. There was a very specific reason that I wanted one of these rifles, and I had decided that it was going to be in one of two chamberings. Now, the .243 Winchester is certainly one of those chamberings. The other option that I was contemplating was the 6.5 Creedmoor. Now, before your head explodes, because most of you that watch me know how I feel about that cartridge, there is a reason why I wanted one of those too. If you saw that video that I put out last year on the Remington Model 600 Mohawk in 6mm Remington, you will know that I obtained that rifle for my daughter. I have two daughters, and when I got that one for that girl, the other one wanted one too, and I had decided to get hers in either a .243 or a 6.5 Creedmoor so that it would be shootable for a small-statured female. Sean, that was aimed at you. So I didn't ever find one locally in the chambering that I wanted, and I live near the Houston area. Believe it or not, you just couldn't find one in a .243. 300 blackout, 7.62 by 39. They were all over the place. This is what I wanted. I couldn't find one, so I went to the urine-scented back alleys of the internet, found this one on Palmetto State's website, got it out the door for $667.44 plus a $25 transfer at the local FFL. It is adorned with a Vortex Viper 6.5 to 20 by 44 scope. that I already had sitting around, but I had pretty much decided I was going to put on this rifle. I don't recall exactly what I paid for that scope. I did get a pretty good deal on it. The scope, the rings, the sunshade, one of those nice neoprene covers, all in was somewhere around $400, bringing this to about an $1,100 combo. Now, I know some of you are saying, that's insane. Why would you set up a rifle that costs that much for a youth shooter? Well, for starters, I wanted to set them up for success. I wanted to review this rifle. Putting two and two together, it just seemed like it would make for a good package. And while I was expecting good things out of it, I didn't have my sights set real high, or I should say the bar set real high for what I was expecting out of it. Boy, was I ever wrong. I am not saying that this rifle is the best rifle I ever purchased. What I am saying, quote me on this, you can come back later or we'll talk about it again, is for the money out of the box, this rifle is, if not the best, one of the top 2 or 3 that I have ever owned, where I picked it up, I stuck a scope on it, I took it to the range, and was immediately satisfied with the results. I purchased this rifle with my own hard-earned money. I have no endorsements from anybody at all whatsoever to make this video. If there was something wrong with this rifle, you would be the first one to know, and I would be the one telling you. The rifle exceeded my expectations in every possible imaginable way. From the overall fit and finish and the quality of the coatings that are on it, I was extremely pleased. The trigger pull out of the box, while not super light, measured with my Wheeler trigger pull gauge, was 4 pounds 5 ounces on average. It is adjustable. I see no reason to adjust it down based on the results that we obtained from the range work that we have already done on it. Quite often you'll find a rifle like this and you'll take it out to the range with a variety of ammunitions and you'll have to shoot a few different types, different weights perhaps, through it to find something that the rifle really likes. That is the norm. That is usually what I find myself having to do. For those of you that saw this series, you'll know that my other 243 Winchester, which is a Winchester Model 70 that we rebuilt out of a parts kit, if you want to call it, that my dad brought back with him from Alaska, is extremely finicky and really only shoots well with one load that we found so far, and that is 100 grain Winchester PowerPoints in 243 Winchester, which is quite possibly the very first load that was ever designed for the 243 Winchester. We know that one likes them. It doesn't shoot little tiny clusters. It shoots on average around an inch. I have gotten a couple of little thumbnail size groups out of it, but even with a lot of tinkering, it took a while to find a load that rifle really likes. So I already had a few of those laying around. In addition, I purchased 4 other loads, retail. I bought them online, but purchased them with my money to take out and test. We have over here on this side, 90 grain Hornady Precision Hunter ELDX. Right next to it, we have the Hornady Superformance 95 grain SST. I believe, although I'm not 100% certain, that 95 grain projectile is exactly the same as the one that they load for the 6mm Remington in the Superformance load that my 6mm Remington shoots extremely well. I believe the bullet is the same. That being said, moving right along over here, we've got the PowerShock 100 grain, and next to it, I've got Federal Fusion in 95 grain. So I've got a 90, a 95, a 100, and another 95, as well as the 100 grain Winchester PowerPoints. So we have a good variance of bullet weights here to experiment with, and all of these are what I would consider a medium-sized or deer-sized game load for the 243. I didn't mess around with any varmint chamberings for this rifle.
Vamoose, you little varmint.
So we took it out to the range and ran it through its paces, and this is what we found out. I did my initial sight-in work to get the scope zeroed on the rifle with the Winchester PowerPoint 100 grain projectiles. I kind of screwed up, and the box that I took with me out to the range only had 7 or 8 rounds in it, and by the time I had the scope dialed in, I didn't have enough left over to give it a proper group. So I don't have a group for reference with those, but just know that it was shooting about a quarter-size group at 100 yards. So then I moved on over here to the Hornady Precision Hunter ELDX 90 grain bullet. The first group that I fired with it, if you'll look there, you'll see it was a little bit to the left, and it came in just under 1 inch at 0.94 inches. Jumping over to the Hornady Superformance, I fired a group of 3 that hit to just about the same point of impact, and it came in at 3/4 of an inch, or right at 0.73 of 1 inch. Moving on to the Federal PowerShock 100 grain, again in a similar point of impact, that group came in at 0.79, or just under 0.8 of 1 inch. I finally fired the Federal Fusion 95 grain, and that one came in with the smallest group of round 1 at 0.071 of 1 inch. By this point, I was really getting excited. I had 5 rounds that I had fired. Now, keep in mind, I zeroed with the Winchester load. The other 4 cartridges that I fired through it all hit to about the same point of impact with groups that were about the same size. I couldn't believe my eyes. Not only were they all grouping well, they were all shooting to the same point of impact. What that means to me is I could zero this rifle at 100 yards, take it deer hunting at 100 or 200 yards, and be pretty much where I wanted to be with any one of these 4 interchangeably. That's huge. Now, after we had finished with the first round of testing, I made an adjustment to put those groups on the bullseye and went back through and fired again. On the second round through, I got the only group fired of the day that went over 1 inch, surprisingly, came from the Hornady Precision Hunter 90 grain ELDX. That group came in at 1.125 inches. That was the worst group we fired all day, and the only group that went over 1 inch. Moving on to group number 2 with the Hornady Superformance 95 grain SSTs, we came in at 0.03 inches larger than the first one, and that was a 0.76, just over 3/4 of an inch. Moving on to the 100 grain Federal PowerShocks, group number 2 came in at 0.9 of an inch, 0.91. If you'll notice, there's a trend with all 3 of those loads. The first group I fired was ever so slightly smaller than the second one. There is a reason for that. I never really let the rifle cool down. I was giving it about 5 minutes in between groups, but by the time I got around to doing the second set of groups, the rifle was quite warm. So, in all fairness, if I would have had the time at the time to allow it to cool down a little better in between strings, we might have cleaned up some of these groups just a little bit. That being said, we moved on to the second group that we fired with the Federal Fusion 95 grain. If you recall from the first round of testing, we got the best group of the day, for the first round anyway, out of the Federal Fusion. Well, with that in mind, the second group that we fired with the 95 grain Federal Fusion came in at 0.59 of 1 inch. So almost a half-inch group. And again, not only was it the best group of that round, it was the best group of the day, and more than likely will be the round of choice that I choose for hunting with this rifle this fall. There you have it. An out-of-the-box rifle that, compared to other rifles in its price range, functioned really, really well, has a fantastic weather-resistant finish on it. Don't get me started on some of the other weather-resistant finishes that we have tested here recently. That's coming up in another video. You're going to see some crazy stuff with a much more expensive than this rifle. And all I can tell you is, if all of the Ruger Americans are shooting as well as this one does, some of these other companies better take notice and follow suit, or they're going to get left behind. At this price point, this is the best rifle I've ever purchased. So take it for what it's worth. This is one guy's opinion of one rifle that he purchased. It wasn't a cherry-picked rifle given to me by the manufacturer, for me to make a review with. Maybe I was just having a really good day at the range that day. I don't know, but I doubt it. But what I do know is, if you're looking for something in a hunting rifle that's a little nicer than something with a cheap black plastic stock and has some nice features like the spiral fluted barrel and a Cerakote finish and a muzzle brake, or the ability to adapt something else to the muzzle end of the weapon, if you need something that a young shooter could grow into that has an adjustable length of pull, I don't think at this point in time, mid-year 2024, that there's much else on the market better than this Ruger American Gen 2. I would like to know what you think about it. Leave me a comment down below. Also, be brutal. Let me know what you think about this unedited video. Until next time, folks, take care and God bless.